Welcome back. And we finished last lecture talking about Wesley and about his special experience. And it was so special for him that he decided that he will preach about this salvation by faith alone, everywhere and to everyone. Probably at that time, churches, the Church of England, they were not ready for this kind of preaching, and he was not allowed. Wesley was not allowed to preach it, or maybe the way he preached it. And he decided that he will preach somewhere else. If he is not allowed to preach in the churches, in the church buildings, he will preach somewhere else. Little by little, he wanted to, and he started to reform the Church of England. And he didn't want to leave the Church of England or separate from Church of England. He somehow believed the Church of England is a good church, but he wanted to reform it, or at least he wanted people to go through spiritual transformation and be real believers, to be real Christians. And he's trying to organize different kind of groups of people inside the Church of England, and the big groups were called societies. When people would come and worship on Sunday, it's like community. And then there were classes, and they studied Bible together. It would be like 10, 12 people. And they also had bands. Bands would be like really small groups, 3, 5 people, and these were the people whom you can trust and you can confess. Whatever you have done wrong, you can share with these people because you trust them completely. And Wesley believed that this way he can help people to grow spiritually. And he did, actually. It was absolutely a good way for people to grow spiritually. His relationship with Moravians somehow were not perfect, we can say, because he went to visit them in Germany, and he noticed that they believe a little bit different than he believed, because somehow they didn't pay attention to works. Yes, you're saved by faith alone. You're not saved by works, but at the same time, if you're saved, then your works should somehow testify about your salvation. And he didn't see this among Moravians. They believed that you need to be only converted once, and it's all. Nothing about works. And somehow they also believed that at this conversion, at this point in your life, you get this assurance of salvation, and it's enough. You don't have any doubts ever. You always know that you are saved. You always feel this presence of God. You don't need anything else. Personally, Wesley, even after that experience which he had, this strangely warmed heart, he still had doubts. Not about his salvation, really, but somehow he had some doubts, and he was somehow struggling, and it took him for a while to really understand everything, what is going on in his life. And in some sense, we can say that he was building his relationship with God. And therefore, when we are building our relationship with God, we also can have doubts. We can talk to God, we can discuss with God in our prayers all our doubts. And Moravians, they didn't believe that, or at least they didn't allow people to believe that. They said that if you are converted, you're converted, and it's all. You're not supposed to have any doubts. If you have any doubts, it means you're not converted yet. And therefore, Wesley was struggling because they keep telling him, you're not a real Christian. If you have doubts, you're not a real Christian, you're not converted probably. And they even didn't allow him to take part in their communion, in the Lord's Supper. And he was really upset about this kind of theology. And he rejected them. He didn't want to teach their theology because he didn't believe it. And it was some kind of like sad experience in his life because he loved them in the beginning, and he was converted maybe because of them, or at least he got this special experience because of them. But anyway, he had to reject this wrong theology that you don't need to do anything else after your conversion. Yes, you do. You have to grow spiritually. You have to build your relationship with God. Continue, building your relationship with God. And this, it was one of his, one of the issues with which he struggled a lot, this relationship with Moravians. And then there was another crisis in his life when his close friend, Whitefield, he died. Because before that point in his life, somehow Wesley probably didn't pay much attention to the idea of predestination. He was talking mostly about salvation, but somehow he believed that all people are elected for salvation, we can say, or Christ died for everyone, not for just for elected, for some small group. Christ died for everyone. And when his friend died, his friend believed in predestination. He was from this Methodist society or group of people from the beginning, and all the other people who followed Whitefield, they believed in predestination. And there was another crisis, another struggle. But somehow it helped Wesley to, in some sense, to justify his position, to be sure that his belief, his theology is what he is teaching really, that his theology was that all people are elected for salvation. And the only condition for them is that they have to accept God's grace. This is the only condition. They are not, there isn't this kind of God who would, one group of people from the beginning, God will send to heaven and the other group for nothing, they can do nothing, he will send to hell. No, all people can be saved, and Christ died for everyone, and the only condition is it's according to their own will. They can accept this God's grace and accept this salvation, or they can reject it. And at the end of Wesley's life, there were one more crisis when this revolution happened in America, and there was the separation between America and Britain. The Church of England left America, and all the people in Anglican churches, they were left without any priests. And the problem was they couldn't take part in the communion. No priest, no communion. Like, who's going to do the communion for us? And then Wesley decided to make a decision to allow his Methodist people to be ordained and to become priests without the permission of the official church, without the permission of official Anglican church. And this was done in order to help other people, lay people, to have this Holy Communion, to serve to these people, to serve the Holy Communion for all the people who were left in America. And this was a hard decision for him as well, because later it's brought the separation between the Methodist churches and the Church of England, because all these Methodist people, they just left the Church of England and they became the separate church. And later we know that in 19th century there was this famous holiness movement in America, and majority of people who were leaders of this holiness movement, they were from these Methodist churches. At least the leaders from who founded the Church of the Nazarene, they were from these Methodist churches, and we are thankful for these Methodist people in America, and we are thankful for this holiness movement, and we are thankful to God that this happened, because now we have this, the Church of the Nazarene, which we are part of. Okay, we will talk more about. Okay, let me switch this slide. Somehow my computer doesn't allow me to do that. Okay, we will talk more about some key elements of Wesleyan theology, which we got from Wesley. Many theologians, they say that for Wesley, the most important part was salvation. If we're talking about theology, theology of salvation is at the heart of his theology. And this means that what Wesley was interested the most is the relationship between God and human beings. He was always interested how to establish this relationship between God and human beings, how to bring people to God, or how God is bringing human beings to himself, and how to maintain this relationship. It's not only to establish, but to maintain, how to live out this relationship. And it's this is the main focus of Wesley's theology, and therefore this is about our salvation. How are we saved by God? And it's not only what God is doing in our life, but also the other question for us about salvation: what shall we do to be saved? Or, it's very biblical, it's from the Bible. You remember this story about Jesus and this rich person who came to him and said, "What shall I do to be saved?" It's not about what shall I believe, which is really popular in our societies, in the contemporary world. We would say, what do you believe? What kind of religion do you belong? What kind of church? What kind of denomination? It's not what shall I believe. It's about what shall I do to be saved. This is the main question which Wesley was dealing with, and it's very biblical. And one more thing about salvation, Wesley believed that it's not some isolated steps. I have done this, I have done that. Okay, there was this conversion, then I got my sanctification, I got my entire certification. Okay, I'm saved. Okay, I got these 2-3 steps and I'm saved. No, it's actually a process. It's not this Catholic phrase, order of salvation. It's also correct, order of salvation, but it sounds like, oh, we have some points. And okay, I have done this point, I have done that. It's more, the proper phrase would be, or better phrase would be, way of salvation, because it never stops, never ever, because we always communicate with God, and we always, in the presence of God, we can say, and we have somehow to maintain this relationship with God, and it's a process. It's not just some steps. It's a process. There are some steps, but between the steps there is a process. How we are supposed to develop this relationships with God which we have. Okay, we can also say about another key element of Wesleyan theology because we can say that Wesley has very optimistic views of salvation, and he talked a lot about power of grace. And even when he started preaching salvation by faith alone, it's about grace. It's about whether you receive this God's grace or not. And he believed that we have this grace which works with us, which leads us toward God. We have this grace from the beginning. When we are born, at our birth, God gives us this prevenient grace. Prevenient means that grace goes ahead of us, if we can say. God gives us this grace for nothing. We're just born. And we haven't done anything. It's not that we are deserving this grace. No, it's like God gives us His grace from the beginning. We are born, we receive this grace, and this God's grace is trying to draw us to God. And then, at the moment of our conversion, it's still, we have different names, different terminology there. Different terms. It's prevenient grace, justifying grace, sanctifying grace. It's still the same grace, actually. The terminology is used just to explain different events in your life or how God works in your life. But it's exactly the same grace. It's like God doesn't give it different names. It's just God's grace. But anyway, when we accept this grace, from God, and at the moment of our conversion, then we receive this justifying grace that justifies us. And Wesley believed an interesting thing. He believed that at that moment, it's not only that we receive different title, like, okay, we were sinners and now we're children of God. It's not some kind of like fiction. He believed that at that moment, at the moment of our conversion, something happens in the spiritual world or even inside us, and the recreation begins. Something real happens. It's something real. We are changed. It's not that we changed somehow psychologically, or we have some social title that we're children of God. No, it's like real change. We can say even like physical or change, or something is happening, that spiritual probably change. Something is happening with us, and it's done not by us. It's done by the Holy Spirit. And it's called sanctification. The first moment of sanctification happens at the moment of our conversion. We are justified and sanctified, the initial sanctification, we can call it, at the same time. Something is happening, the real thing happening. It's recreation, the recreation started by the Holy Spirit. And this sanctifying grace keep working with us. It works with our behavior. It works with everything in our life, we can say. And it produces inner transformation, and people will be able to see, because of this inner transformation, people will be able to see outward change. Our hearts will be changed. Our minds will be changed. The Holy Spirit will change our heart and our mind. And it's inner transformation which will be visible as outward change for other people. And also Wesley talked a lot about entire sanctification, because in his life many Christians, they testified about this entire sanctification. There were a lot of testimonies that this entire sanctification happened when this God's grace, sanctifying grace, or God's love, changed the heart of some person completely, and the person was cleaned completely from this sin inside their hearts, and they after that they truly could love God and love their neighbors, and not to sin. They were able not to sin. And Wesley, we say it like it's optimistic. His theology is optimistic. Wesley believed in that. He believed that it's possible. The Holy Spirit can do this. Is able to do that. The Holy Spirit is God. He can do that, and it proves that the power of God's grace, the power of the Holy Spirit, is much more powerful and stronger than the power of sin, which is in us. And it's very important to remember about that the power of grace, of God's grace, and power of the Holy Spirit is bigger and stronger than this power of sin that influences us. And the next one is, which we'll discuss, the key element. I think everybody knows who are part of the church that our theology, which we use in our churches, it's practical theology. It's not some kind of like philosophical ideas which we cannot use in our churches. I think in other courses you, as the students, probably have seen it that every time among the assignments which you are given through the course, usually you are asked to apply the knowledge which you received. Whatever course you're doing, you have at least one among the assignments that you are supposed to apply your knowledge. The theology which we're discussing, Wesleyan theology, it's always practical. It's not something that we cannot use in our lives, or something that nobody is interested. The theology which we are talking about, it's theology which we can, it's our understanding of God, which will be visible in our behavior, in our actions, and people will know that we are believers, we're Christians, and that we really understand who God is. And our theology, we can somehow confirm our theology through our attitudes and our actions. Our theology, Wesleyan theology, is very practical, and we can apply it, and we can live our faith, and we can show our faith through the way how we live our lives. And it's very important. I believe it's very important. We will talk more, but we will do this next week. This is our last lecture for this first week.